She rejected you because you don't understand this one concept. Today, I'm going to teach you a super valuable idea that will allow you to get second dates, third dates easily. If you don't understand this concept, the right women will keep losing interest in you and you won't enjoy the dating process. But if you understand what I'm teaching you here today, you will develop unshakable confidence, no matter what the congruence test may be, no matter what happens on the date, and you'll actually have a fantastic time during the journey of finding the right girlfriend or wife. The concept is called owning it. Most men think that if women discover their flaws, it's over. She never rejected you because of your flaws. She rejected you because you're ashamed of them. I'll tell you a little story. When I was 13 years old in Germany, we had religious practice. And what happened was we were all sitting in a circle in the middle of church and I farted. And I was so unbelievably ashamed of it because I was 13 and we're all sitting in a circle and everybody's laughing and my head was getting red and I was feeling a sense of embarrassment and shame. I just kind of wanted to sink into the ground. The only other time that I had a similar sensation of embarrassment was when I was in a nightclub in Berlin many, many, many years ago, where I hadn't learned anything about this whole dating or relationship subject, where I was with a friend of mine and he was dancing with a lady, he was having a great time, and I was standing there in my head, overthinking, wanting to go and do an approach for an hour and a half, until I eventually convinced myself that I was going to be able to do it. Now, when I did it, I was so insecure that in a German nightclub, I walked over to her and I talked to her in English and asked her, "Excuse me," very quietly, so she probably couldn't even hear me, "Do you know where the toilets are?" And then she looked at me like, huh? Like she gave me that look because she probably couldn't even understand me because my opener was whack. What I said was whack. The energy that I said it with was whack. The entire thing was off. And then that facial expression in and of itself was enough for me to feel deeply insecure. I felt the same sense of embarrassment and shame. You know when blood is rushing into your head and you feel like everybody's staring at you and you really don't want to be there anymore and it triggers a negative spiral downwards and you just want to isolate yourself? Yeah, that's exactly what I experienced then. Because I didn't understand the concept of owning it. When I farted in church, not deliberately, by the way, it was an accident. And I felt so embarrassed. If I would have just owned it and smiled and said, "Okay, cool, no problem, that's funny." Because remember, anything that's awkward that makes you feel insecure could be funny. If I would have refused to feel any insecurity, there wouldn't have been any reason to feel it. When she rejected me or she gave me that look, if I would have refused to feel any insecurity whatsoever, I wouldn't have felt any. You can refuse to make other people's words or reactions to your behavior make you feel insecure. The reason it ultimately makes you feel insecure is because you're still depending on their validation and their approval for your emotional certainty. If you understand that you can learn to own it, whatever it is, the fact that you're currently going through a divorce, that you got a divorce a couple of years ago, that you've never had a relationship, that it's been 4 years since you've had a relationship, that you had a lot of relationships, that you're ginger, that you have vampire teeth, that your zip is open, whatever the flaw or insecurity may be, that way, if you can learn to just own it and refuse to feel any insecurity around it, that will build an unfathomable amount of confidence and she will actually start to respect you. Most men, they flex. Money, cars, watches. The problem is she can see that you're trying to prove yourself. She can see that you're trying to impress her. And the more you're trying to impress her, the less impressed she'll be. Owning it is the anti-flex that way because it makes her feel like you don't even care about the outcome. Obviously, you want a great outcome. Obviously, you want things to go well, but you don't need it. Oh, your zip is open. Oh my God, no. What? You're still going through a divorce? Yeah, you know, but... And you start justifying yourself. You start over-explaining yourself. If you just own it and you say, yeah. You can give an explanation, of course. That doesn't mean that you can completely stop explaining yourself. That's not what it means. Sometimes you really don't have to give an explanation at all. But it really just means that you refuse to let any outside circumstance cause you insecurity because you have core confidence. Owning it hijacks emotional frames. Because if she gives you a congruence test and she says, wow, you're so ginger, whatever it may be, maybe a silly little example, she does or says anything to throw you off your game, to test your emotional resilience, to test your confidence. If she says, oh, wow, you're so ginger, you're like, yeah, what's wrong with that? We deserve love too. Or you can say, yeah, my parents were thinking of giving me up for adoption the second they found out as well. Ha ha. You accept and amplify the premise. You own it, whatever it is. Zip is open, ha ha, fine. You just refuse it. And if I had understood that concept, then, let's go to the left here. If I had understood that concept, it would have been so much easier for me to enjoy the dating process. I wouldn't have been so afraid. For example, you're going to a party. Somebody hosts a house party. You don't know anybody but the host. And you're almost dreading it because you're worried that everybody knows each other except for you and you'll be the odd one out. If you just own it that you don't know anybody, you're like, hey, I don't know anybody except for Tim. Nice to meet you. And you introduce yourself and you're perfectly okay with it not working out with those people because you don't depend on their approval. You don't depend on their validation. You can enjoy life so much more. Owning it, the importance cannot be understated. Anytime you felt insecure on a date, you could have just owned it. Anytime, the condom slipped. I mean, that's a bit of a different situation, right? Obviously, you want to make sure that's on. And always, a little pro tip, by the way, you can proactively change it because when it starts feeling a little bit too good, you may want to replace that. That was a conversation I've had with somebody recently. That's why that came up. You may want to proactively replace that. But even something like this doesn't have to make you feel insecure. It's so funny. There's a part where Theo Vaughn is on the Joe Rogan podcast, and Joe Rogan asks him, do you want to put your headphones on at the beginning of the podcast? Because Joe Rogan has his on, and Theo doesn't. And Theo goes, oh, wow, I didn't see you have yours on. And then Joe goes, it's a bit lonely here in headphone land. And then Theo goes, yeah, it's awkward. It's like when you're putting on a condom and the other person is still on their phone. And by person, I mean woman, right? Now, again, any situation that could be a cause for you to feel insecure can be an amazing opportunity for her to respect you. And respect is a gateway drug to desire. If she respects you, she'll start to desire you. And if she realizes that you really don't depend on her approval or her validation, it makes you so much more attractive. And again, that doesn't mean that you will become an outcast, that you don't pay attention to society's norms anymore. No, it doesn't. But it means you become free in your expression. And it means you value the opinion of a few select people much more than those of the people who just don't matter, which is 99% of society. You should care about whether your mother thinks you're a good person or your future wife, your current wife, you don't have one yet, your siblings, the people who actually know you. Do they think you're a good person? If that's the case, fine. The rest doesn't really matter. I was with my father in a restaurant in Berlin last week, and my father is an amazing man. I'm so lucky to have an unbelievable relationship with my mother and my father. They're not together anymore. They haven't been for many years. Unbelievably intelligent, super loving, super kind people. Now, we do have slightly different opinions on certain things. So, for example, we're sitting in this restaurant, in a steak restaurant in Berlin by the river, 5 p.m. or whatever it was. And I am rather loud. My father is the exact opposite. Meditating for 20 years, super calm, super loving, super kind. And we're in the restaurant, and it's basically 95% empty. And I'm talking to him, and he says, David, a bit more quiet. Because he's so respectful, and he doesn't want anybody else to feel uncomfortable because I'm loud, or because we're loud. Because he says, his core belief, which is amazing, is that my freedom should never intervene with anybody else's freedom. Amazing. Good point. We just have slightly different interpretation what freedom means. And I just think my volume won't make anybody else feel that because I wasn't screaming. I'm just a bit more loud. And so there was a bit of tension. Now, I love him. He loves me. We have an amazing relationship. And I told him there's not a single person in the world other than him, because I don't get to see him that often, that would make me reduce my volume to 20% of what it is. I almost felt a little castrated. But I told him I'm doing it for you because I don't want to be selfish. So I want him to have a great experience. Now, I wouldn't do that for anybody else. And if somebody else has a problem with my volume, cool, they can come and tell me. And if somebody were to ask me to be more quiet of the restaurant, obviously I would be, but until they do that, I'm not going to reduce my volume because I want to be free in my expression. There's also some cultural nuances around that, whether you're in a restaurant in Germany or in Ireland or in London. If you go to a restaurant in Ireland or London, they're rarely quiet, which I like. They're a little bit more lively, and Germany is a bit more German, right? That is a bit of an example of a situation where you might be faced with a lack of compatibility. Now, they're family members, right? So my father and I were super compatible in a lot of ways, but in other ways, we disagree. And that's fine. But the time you do get to spend with family members, you want to value them. Choose to love your family members and then carefully curate your environment in terms of the friends and the friends or loved ones you want to have in your life, because you really need to be compatible. Because if you feel like you have to restrict your own freedom of expression around somebody, it's just a lack of compatibility, and you should just move on. You should just probably find somebody else. Because if you feel like you're constantly being judged by somebody, it may not be because you're not owning it. Let's go to the left here. It may simply be because there's a lack of compatibility and you will never see eye to eye on a lot of these very, very important subjects. So my invitation for you is the following. Whenever there's a situation that arises that could be cause for insecurity, just own it. Whatever it is, make a decision, write this down. Owning it, whatever it may be, creates freedom of expression. It creates fun. It creates enjoyment. Because remember, everybody has flaws. Everybody has imperfections. Everybody is gonna spill a little bit of water sometimes, have their zip open, whatever the temporary manifestation of imperfection may be. Everybody has them. The difference is some own it and they refuse to feel any insecurity, and other people, they'll be shaken. Own it and she'll be so much more excited to be with you because you're a man, you're a being in space, and you are living up to the most important responsibility you have in life, which is to create certainty. In other words, confidence from within.